Sie wussten alle ganz genau, wie das ist.
Hey friends, we're launching Visual Studio 2019 today, and we wanted to try something different. Sure, there's going to be demos and code and lots of fun, but I think it's easy in today's internet to forget about people. And I drove up from Portland for this event to show you that there's hundreds of folks here in Washington and working remotely who are excited about making software for and with you. So I thought, why don't we talk to them? But first, a few notes about what's happening today. We're going to have live stream sessions after the keynote. There's a virtual attendee party on Twitch, and there's on-demand sessions that are actually available right now. I also want you to go to Twitch because there's going to be all-day interactions with the program managers and the programmers that build Visual Studio 2019. Remember that Visual Studio 2019 and VS 2019 for Mac is now available for download at visualstudio.com. Now, if you're using Visual Studio today, you're probably using one of the many extensions available. Our amazing extension partners have already updated over 1,000 extensions to be compatible with 2019, and you can get those in the marketplace. We're also releasing Visual Studio LiveShare today, which is integrated with Visual Studio 2019 and can also be used in Visual Studio Code. We're going to chat about LiveShare a little bit later. Also, DevOps is an important part of the developer lifecycle, and Azure DevOps Server 2019 is generally available as of March 5th. We're going to cover Azure DevOps and GitHub in more detail, both in this keynote and during the live stream after. Now, let's go and find some of the people that made all this possible. And I also want you to keep an eye out for some of the little gems and Easter eggs that we've hidden in this video. And let us know online using the hashtag VS2019 if you find them. This is a great room, but it's a beautiful day outside. So if you don't mind, we could have our meeting on the deck.
Sure, why not? Yeah. Get some chairs?
Yeah, grab some chairs. Cool. Good, I'm glad we got such good weather.
Yeah, it is gorgeous.
It's better to be outside than to be in a conference room, even a nice conference room like the Treehouse.
For sure.
So Julia, you're in charge of all of DevDiv, but you've worked here for a while. You've had basically every job in developer division, haven't you?
I sure did.
And you've got a little gift for you here.
The worst named Microsoft product ever.
Did you work on this?
I sure did. It's very useful.
Yeah.
It's Visual Basic for the web.
Really? It says you can make dynamic applications. It's quite nice.
It is.
Are we still using some of your code?
I think it is in there indeed.
That's awesome. We're also Visual Studio, right? Because we're now doing Visual Studio 2019. This is 22 years ago.
That's right, and that's the first version of Visual Studio ever. So in 2 years ago, we celebrate 20 years of Visual Studio.
That's fantastic.
And it's kind of, I have something to do with every single version of Visual Studio.
Yeah.
So if you ever have any problem with it, I have something to be blamed for.
important that everyone be able to develop. There was a huge push for accessibility. We want to make sure that it works for everyone, no matter what language they speak. Having everyone to be able to be a developer was a priority as well.
So we're looking at how we can make developers more productive. We're looking at developers sitting in every corner of the world and their feedback. We also have 23% of our team located outside of Redmond. So that's another very important source of information.
There's a huge amount of people that are remote, myself included. I would have guessed it was single digits, but it's over almost 25% of people who are remote. And now we get to use cool things like LiveShare to go and collaborate. Now, Amanda, you own. Do you hear this?
I always find that funny.
Why do we say that at Microsoft? You own Visual Studio.
I don't know. It's always been that way, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you own that, right?
Yeah, I work on Visual Studio.
You bought this. I work on Visual Studio. But you own that. So when that means ownership, that means the shipping, the getting it out the door, and then making sure that it's focused on the right things.
Yeah. I mean, basically, my job is to make sure that we ship the right product at the right time.
But I am told from people who know both of you that you still somehow find time to code. There's time when you're saying, this code doesn't do the way thing I wanted to do. And I've also heard people say, when talking about you, Julia, that how did she know that? And someone says, oh, well, she had your job before you. Well, Julia was the engineering manager for that, or she was responsible for this. Like, you've both had basically every job as you've worked up to the places that you're at.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in the developer division at Microsoft since 2001. Yeah. So almost 18 years, I guess, and I've worked on pretty much every product at Microsoft, but from the developer lens. So, I've worked on Xbox at some point, and SQL, and Azure, and Office. Pretty much everything. And to your point earlier around, do I actually still get to code? Yes, I actually do. It doesn't happen as often as I like it to, but pretty much everybody on my team, and we're the PM team, so the product manager team, everybody on my team codes. And we have to, because our customers are developers. And so for us to actually evaluate the product, we have to do it.
It's surprising to see how many people are writing documentation. Someone was telling me that they saw some check-ins from Scott Guthrie, that he may have been up late at night doing some documentation check-in.
We have built a system to make it really easy. So one of the things we did is that we rebuilt the documentation engineering system to be based on GitHub. And so, and then there's repos out there for every single language that we support, and people can just do a pull request if they find any issues with our documentation. And we really encourage everyone to work and help improve the documentation that our customer actually in the end read.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a series of systems that are making all the loops. We talk about the developer inner loop and the outer loop. All these loops are being tightened up, whether it be how we make software, how quickly we ship software, the quality bars, all of the things. Everything's continuous integration, deployment.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think that the way we think about it is that even though people think about Visual Studio as a client software, that installs on your machine, but internally we really treat it very much as a service. We're continuously improving it. We're continuously looking at the feedback customer give us in every way that they do. And then our goal is to make the product better and better, every day.
That's pretty cool. And I've been using, but in the past, I would use like Skype or Teams, and I would send a screenshot, like a moving picture of my Visual Studio, but that was really inefficient, especially when I was tethering my phone or I was overseas. I was really having a challenge. I never would have seen LiveShare coming, though. Like, I didn't know I needed it, but then I needed it.
Yeah, actually, so we did a lot of interviews over probably 2 or 3 different years of particularly focusing on development teams that are focused on time to market as their top concern when they choose their tools and their processes. And what we found was that a lot of teams were really struggling with collaboration. And they were especially struggling with collaboration with remote employees. And their definition of who was a remote employee was actually pretty static. It was even to the point that some people didn't want to hire any more engineers on their team, even though they had business demand, because dealing with somebody who actually was physically in a separate room, even if it was down the hall, was too much cost. It was clear that we had to do something that was pre-check-in time, because the check-in time is basically too late. Yeah. At that point, you already have a pretty high cost to be able to get review feedback, and then you end up with iteration cycles where you have to kind of hand it off. It's as efficient as like email, right? But that's really where LiveShare came from. We kind of figured out if we could actually enable collaboration ahead of the check-in and make it possible for you to collaborate in real time, that would be a lot more productive. You know, we also have situations where people have different accessibility needs, and so they might have different kinds of settings on their developer desktop, like they use narrator, or you know, they might use a high contrast mode, which might make it very, very uncomfortable for you to actually share my screen, right? But with LiveShare, you can actually connect into my environment. You don't have to do anything to get your dev box to be set up other than have Visual Studio or VS Code on your machine. And you can actually see my environment. You could even execute commands in the terminal if I give you that access.
Now, as you know, I'm a C# fan. I'm all about C#. I love C#, but I'm noticing, then I think Microsoft is noticing, that hybrid solutions, multi-polyglot solutions are the word of the day. Not everyone is going to use just .NET. Visual Studio suddenly supports basically everything. Was that a conscious decision that it would support all of these languages?
We want to build the best tool to support any customer, no matter what kind of application or service you want to develop on any operating system. So that is a core pivot of what we're doing from a strategy perspective. Now you see us really follow that up with our investment in Visual Studio Code, which is obviously open source and cross-platform. We made .NET open source and cross-platform, and that become a common theme in how we do everything.
I had a moment where I was literally in Visual Studio on Windows in C++ doing remote debugging to Linux, and it just worked. It was a joy, and I was in the middle of doing it, and before I did, I'm doing remote debugging in Visual Studio on Linux, and it's just working just great.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I was doing something I shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I mean, that was, if I think back to 2001 when I came to Microsoft for the first time and used Visual Studio for the first time, because the first version was out then in the .NET era. And you know, I had come from an Emacs Unix background in college. I experienced IntelliSense for the first time. It's this magical thing, right? And your productivity from, you know, kind of an Emacs environment into a Visual Studio environment where you have this assisted development experience is pretty dramatic. So I still remember that moment, but you know, now thinking back on where Visual Studio was in that era and where it is today, we continue to create more and more of those magical moments.
I was meeting with some kids at a college recently, and they told me that their professor was forcing them to use Notepad without IntelliSense because they thought IntelliSense would rot your brain.
Right.
And I didn't have the heart to tell them that IntelliCode was going to completely change the way that they wrote software. Now we've got AI-assisted IntelliSense that's coming in IntelliCode that people can see with Visual Studio 2019. I'm assuming, though, that that's just the beginning of what we could do with AI from a programming perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, AI could really impact the entire software development lifecycle, from everything to, you know, obviously completing your statements, right? And we will get to the point where we can not just complete, you know, what is the next IntelliSense thing completion that you're going to pick, but actually the entire parameter. I mean, the entire line of code that you're writing, or even potentially an entire code snippet.
Wow.
But not just that. Finding code defects, for example. You know, we've found classes of issues that AI can uncover that your classic static analysis really could never discover before. But we will then be able to take it further into, you know, things like testing, or encouraging you to follow certain practices in terms of, you know, who you seek code reviews from. So this is really just the beginning. Right.
That's exciting. So this is just the beginning of AI and what it could mean for a Visual Studio developer.
Yeah, and I think the goal, just like with IntelliSense, is, you know, we should really be focused on making sure that every keystroke that you write is more efficient, right? We really want to make sure that you're writing the code that only you can write, right? And so if there's anything that we can automate in the system that will actually allow you to become more productive and more expressive, then that's the kinds of things that we focus on.
So you add value where you can add value, and the boring parts.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, we add value where the machine can add value, right? And so if the machine in the cloud can add value and make you more productive as a developer, then that seems like goodness. You can actually write more code for your business.
How did you decide what is going to be in Visual Studio 2019? Like, what are the principles and the priorities and the scope of this is this release and this is that release?
Well, for VS 2019, we really plan on 4 core themes. The first one is performance. Making sure our product is faster and faster with each release is very important to us, to our customers. The second one is a look at big industry trend. How do we make sure customers are developing cloud-native applications in containers in an easy way? That kind of common theme. The third thing we'll look on is really helping with the team collaboration and identifying issues as early as possible. And the fourth one we really look at are a bunch of delighter features across the product where people find value with the upgrade.
But how do you know what she's saying is correct and the customers really want that?
Well, I mean, for every single one of these areas, we actually go through an iterative process where we identify who are the potential customers for that particular feature set, and we bring them into labs or do call downs with them and interview them. And those lab studies are where people can actually play with early prototypes of the product in an environment where we can actually watch how successful they are with the product. So I would definitely encourage you to go check out the UX lab.
So I can go find real customers working on future versions of Visual Studio in a lab. So
yes.
I've had experiences with companies like Microsoft, or maybe Microsoft in the long distance past, where Microsoft was there to like validate assumptions and push agendas.
Yeah.
But you didn't even start with that. You were immediately like, let's go and meet a customer and let them lead the discussion.
Yeah, I like to use the term customer-led inquiry because it's the idea that we don't know when we first start that conversation where it's going to lead to, right? And so we should be open to the idea that it'll lead to some places that we didn't expect. And if we can uncover a more urgent problem that the customer has that we could address, then that's much more valuable than getting validation that the idea that we thought was the biggest problem to solve is actually what we need to go solve.
When we're bringing new people in, though, I've noticed that in the past it has taken like months and months to ramp people up. But you can't really just hire someone and have them sit around for 6 months. You really want to onboard them. Like, how do you bring people onto the team in an organized fashion and get them both into the culture and into the tooling as quickly as possible? Yeah,
I mean, actually, one of the things that we've instituted in the last couple of years is this notion of a dev-div boot camp. So if you're a new employee, either you're on another team and you join our team, or if you're brand new to Microsoft entirely, then you'll spend basically 2 weeks getting kind of a boot camp into what it's like to work in DevDiv.
How do you develop a sense of shared culture in DevDiv so that everyone is all feeling the same about the product and feeling the same about each other?
Well, for culture, one of the key things we learned is that we really need to have shared goals, shared languages, and make sure we're changing our actions to actually embrace the new cultural values. So for us, customer obsession is a core key value that we're embracing. So we're looking at how we're developing our product in a different way to really embrace that particular value.
It seems like there's been a real focus on data. I've seen more dashboards, there's TVs, and everywhere I turn, there's a dashboard showing the build and the burn down chart, all these kind of things. Are you really pushing to be data-driven in your decisions?
Absolutely. Not only from a developer internal engineering process perspective, but more importantly, we want to look at data that our customers are giving us, their particular feedbacks. Our crash rate, reliability in the wild, not only in the engineering internal environment. Those are critical data points to help us understand what is the customer experience with our product while they're using it every day.
And I was told that every release has to be better than the last release.
Absolutely.
That's like an important goal.
That's a very important metric that we track every day. And then we have weekly meetings that we actually look at this metric in terms of is customers' success in acquiring a product, installing a product, updating a product better today than last week? Is customers' experience with reliability and crashes and performance better this week than last week? And then how are we responding to the customer feedback they have provided?
Well, that's super cool. But now I want to know who to go and visit. Who should I talk to first about Visual Studio?
Well, I mean, in some ways, you could really go to Building 18 and just talk to anybody who's there, and they could talk about what's going on with Visual Studio. But I'd also suggest that you go to the UX lab as well and see kind of what we're studying today.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go wander around Building 18. I'll check out the UX lab, and I'll try to find some more cool people that are working on Visual Studio 2019.
Awesome.
Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you, Scott. Have fun Building 18.
I will.
Thanks, Scott. It was fun.
Hey, Scott, want to play?
I don't really play Smash that much. Competitively.
Oh, look at you!
You guys ready?
Hey,
Visual
everybody.
Studio 2019.
Dude, it's gonna be great.
Ooh,
it's
Raspberry
gonna be awesome.
Pi.
Hey, Scott.
I want to see a Raspberry Pi.
Well, we've got one right
everybody.
here.
Awesome.
Talk about Visual Studio 2019?
Let's do it.
Yay!
I'm very happy to be here. I just came over from the Treehouse. I saw Amanda and I saw Julia, and she said that you all are the folks to talk to show me some of the cool stuff in Visual Studio. Why don't we start with you, Pratik?
Awesome.
So I remember when I started up Visual Studio 2019, I was surprised how fast it started. It went right to the start window.
Yeah, so it's a small modal UI, and it starts really fast, faster than the whole Visual Studio IDE starts. And what happens is when it loads, it also asynchronously loads your most recently used project. So this is the same recently used projects list that you had in VS 2017. So all of your pinned items, your solutions, folders, remote repositories, all show up in this recently projects list for you to access really fast with a single click and then get to your code really fast too.
So the whole point is to get me to my code as fast as possible, and I've gone and I've pinned the ones that matter the most to me.
Yep.
And the thing that I find the most cool though is I click on clone or check out code, so I double click on clone, paste, enter, and then I've just brought something down from GitHub or wherever.
Right. If you have the URL, that's awesome. You can just paste in your URL and then hit enter, and then it clones the code. If you don't remember the URL or you don't want to go to the web to get it, you could also sign into your GitHub or Azure repos accounts, and then you can see a list of all the repos that you or your organization has, and then that you can just search for or click on and then clone it down as well without the URL.
Very cool. So autocomplete for my repos in the cloud, and then boom, I'm there.
Yep.
Awesome.
Exactly.
So when I create a new project, this is new. Like this is like a tagged new version of File New Project.
Right, yeah, we totally revamped the create new project process. Instead of a single window that has a tree view that has been a little overwhelming to some of our users, we decided to simplify it and make it a search-based view. So you can really easily and quickly search for the types of templates that you're looking for, and you can, if you don't remember exactly what you're searching for, you can use the filters. So there's language, platform, and project type dropdowns, and you can filter by them and get a smaller list and like narrow it down there, and then you search maybe to even filter in further. So, click on the template that you want. That's one decision. Then we move you to the next decision, which is configuring your project, and that you enter in your name, location, and then you hit go, and you have your project created.
I love that when I was scrolling around in the window here and looking for what I wanted, it got the impression that maybe I wasn't finding what I wanted and tried to offer, like, are you finding what you need? Are you able to get what you want here? It's a much smarter window.
Yeah. That's what we were trying to do.
One of the things that I was impressed with was how many choices there are when you pull down platform or when you pull down project type. It's just so weird to be in Visual Studio 2019 and see Linux and Android and tvOS, all these things are tagged. Yeah,
and Visual Studio has all of those things to offer. So even if you haven't installed them and you haven't used them, say you're a C++ developer and you're doing C++ and you don't know, and that Visual Studio does Python development as well, but this thing offers it to you. This tool offers support for Python as well, and you can quickly say, oh wait, I don't have any templates for Python, let me install them, and then it installs it for you, takes you to the installer, installs them, and then you get Python templates as well, and you can get started with Python.
Very cool. So I see all the things that I could potentially build, and if I don't have that workload, it'll go and get it for me.
Exactly, yeah.
That's hot. On the left-hand side here, what does this say? Recent project templates. What's going on there?
Yeah, so whenever you create a project, it is a long list of templates. And so whenever you create a project, the templates that you use most often and most frequently stay on the left side. So if you want to quickly access, like, hey, I always create console apps or always create class libraries, you can easily go to the left and just click on a template from there and get started with that instead of going through the main list.
That's cool. There's a nice symmetry between the new start window and the new create new project window, because on that left-hand side, it's the stuff I do regularly.
Your recent stuff's on the left, yep. Yeah, and that was the start window in Visual Studio 2019.
That's very cool.
So I love the start window in Visual Studio 2019 as well. I love how easy it is to get started with a new Git repository from either Azure repos or from GitHub. I can just get started. I can pull down a repository without starting up Visual Studio. I can do it right from the beginning. And these URLs are like just kind of baked into my muscle memory, so I just type them out. But yeah, I can browse them as well.
It's really interesting how Git is getting baked into our lives and into our workflows and into the product right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I can stay in Visual Studio 2019 and manage my pull requests. And Julia mentioned actually at the Treehouse that she wants to bake quality in, and they want to catch things before the commit. But then once the commit has happened, they want to make sure the quality goes through the entire process.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's critical. So, I can, of course, write some code and run some tests inside VS 2019. But I also want to catch that as soon as somebody opens a pull request. So if I have a project on GitHub, like an open source project, and I want to take contributions, I want to make sure that their code is good. I want to make sure it builds, and I want to make sure the tests pass. So I want continuous integration for my GitHub projects, for my Azure repos projects. And I use Azure Pipelines for that. So Azure Pipelines has .NET Core 3 ready to go. We've got hosted build agents in the cloud. So we've got Mac, we've got Windows, and we've got Linux. All of them are running the new .NET Core 3, the latest preview, and it's ready to go. So I can actually do my continuous integration right there.
So we talked about how Git is getting incorporated into our lives, and also being remote, and remote collaboration is incorporated into our lives. You're actually remotely collaborating with John right now. John?
Yeah, I'm working with my colleague Jonathan, and he's actually working from home right now, and we're actually trying to work on Teams, and he's trying to do a screen sharing with me to be able to work on his Node app. And instead of it being lockstep, trying to negotiate control one person driving or not, with LiveShare, we're able to independently collaborate while working at our own pace.
So rather than pushing 4K pixels with Teams from a remote location, you're actually remoting the context of the entire application?
Yeah, so it's a simple link, and with that, I can hop into his project, and I get the full context of that. So I can see on the side, I can see all the files and folders that he's working with. A terminal actually opens with all the commands that he was running before this, so I get full context into that. And finally, I am able to see the file that he's working in, and we can see the highlights and cursors as we're going along.
Now, when I was peeking over here and seeing what he was doing before, it looked like he was in VS Code on a Mac, but suddenly now I'm seeing the same Node code in Visual Studio 2019 on Windows.
Yeah, so I'm working in Windows on Visual Studio 2019, and I don't even have the Node workload or Node.js actually installed on my computer, but it's all working on my side because it's all being forwarded from his machine.
And I'm noticing his cursor and his name are appearing. He's selecting code right here and showing you what to be looking at.
So yeah, so with his highlights, he's able to give me some context on the issue that he's looking into.
That's super cool.
So what about debugging, though?
Yeah, so actually I'm able to set down breakpoints, and those breakpoints are synced to Jonathan's machine. I can even hit F5, and my debugger starts, and it attaches to the running app on his machine.
Okay, but when you hit F5 and it runs on his machine, do you still have to do a screen share to see what's going on?
So with LiveShare, the server for the front end is actually shared with me, so I can pull that up in my browser to be able to see it on my side as well.
So your localhost 5000 is his localhost 5000?
Exactly.
And then you can click around the website in order to hit the breakpoint.
Yeah, and we can even negotiate control for debugging, stepping over, stepping into methods between the two of us.
I'm impressed.
That is very cool. Okay, last question. What about IntelliSense?
So yeah, so you're actually able to get all the IntelliSense completions forwarded from Jonathan's machine to mine. With this being a Node app, if I start typing, I can hit dot, and I get a full completion list of all the things that work for this app.
So everything from his machine, watches, and all the context that is the app is being sent over to you?
Yeah, so I'm able to get that full context on my side and work at my own pace.
Interesting. Would even your feature be forwarded?
I do believe it would.
So IntelliCode works on LiveShare, and you've got IntelliCode running on your machine right here.
Yep.
What's this demo that you've got?
Yeah, so first I'm just going to show you sort of our base case, as we call it. So for years we heard from our users, IntelliSense is wonderful. I love it. It helps me so much. But you have to be able to do better than alphabetically. Like, we're all computer scientists. We're smart, right? We can make it better. So what we did is we took the wisdom of the community, and what I mean by that is we took, hundreds of open source repositories on GitHub. We scanned through them to try and find the most popular practices for, APIs, for strings, for asserts. And now when you use any of those within Visual Studio, if I do some sort of string variable dot, it will give me this list of recommended suggestions.
So are you saying that you taught Visual Studio what I'm most likely to type based on what thousands and thousands of programmers that are better than I have already typed?
Yes, that's exactly what we did. So we took, as I said, our tagline, wisdom of the community. We took that whole community input and sort of infused IntelliSense with it so that you can get better recommendations. So now at the top of your IntelliSense list, you get these starred recommendations that are most likely what you want.
Okay, so that's amazing that you brought me the wisdom of the ancients up from all these open source projects, but my project isn't open source. I really want my own custom model that's for me and my team, but that's not for you.
Yeah, no, so we've actually just built that feature, so you can do that now. All you have to do is open the solution that you want a custom model for, head to the IntelliCode page, click Train on My Code, and we create a custom model just for you. It's private to you and whoever you choose to share it with. So if you think your team would benefit from these custom IntelliCode recommendations, you can also share your wisdom with them.
Oh, okay, and then you kind of union them, so I get both the public wisdom and then the wisdom of my own team?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then those stars are going to keep me from having to scroll and go down into the Z's and the Y's.
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. And what's really cool is that it changes depending on your context, right? So if you're just in the body of a method versus if you're in an if statement versus in a for or an else, you could get different recommendations at each point there. So ideally, you just have to tab enter, tab enter, tab enter is what we always.
Are you trying to say that programming for me is just
going to be it's just going to be two things, yeah.
That's cool. And what language is going to do this with?
So right now in Visual Studio 2019, you can use IntelliCode for C#, XAML, and C++. And in Visual Studio Code, you have it for TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, and Java.
Well, now you're just showing off. She brought a Raspberry Pi, which I think is amazing. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Is this machine talking to the Raspberry Pi?
It is. So our Windows 10 application that we've built in Visual Studio 2019 has actually, you know what, let me deploy it. So I will go ahead and deploy our Windows 10 app, and now it is successfully on our Raspberry Pi because I've installed Windows 10 on it. Isn't that cool?
That's overachieving. Very nicely done.
So this application will tell us if Visual Studio is ready to launch. In fact, it says, is it time to launch? Do you want to try it?
Let's find out. Touchscreen. It is time to launch it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I hope everyone tries it out.
That's just fantastic. Well, thank you so much for showing me this. I'm going to go find a soda pop. If I can get you anything.
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'm going to go find some more PMs to talk about Visual Studio 2019.
Awesome.
Have
See you outside.
All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye. Ooh, now we can relax.
Wasn't that cool? Now, I know you're going to see a lot more of these features later on. I just love talking to all these passionate people behind the features and hearing about why we build them. You know what else I love here? Free soda. Free soda at Microsoft. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can download Visual Studio 2019 on PC and Mac right now. Visual Studio community users can head over to visualstudio.com, but if you're a Visual Studio professional or enterprise subscriber, there's even more goodness available to you through the my.visualstudio.com portal. Of course, you can download Visual Studio, but you'll also find Azure DevOps access. That's up to $150 in monthly Azure credits, technical and professional training subscriptions, and much more. Also, speaking of technical training, head over to launch.visualstudio.com to find links to all new Visual Studio 2019 technical training courses from both Pluralsight and LinkedIn Learning. Now, let's head over to the UX lab that Amanda mentioned earlier to check out how we do customer research here in DevDiv. So I'm going over to the PM UX UI lab. I think it's in this building. I understand that they're actually doing some studies right now, so I'm keeping my voice down because I don't want to interrupt anybody. Okay, it's over here. We've got Dr. Rich. It looks like they're doing a study right now.
Hi, Scott. We're so glad you could join us.
How's it going? So what do we got going on here?
Yeah, come on in. This is our research lab.
Okay.
Right now we have a Python study happening, and this is our entire product team. So you're going to get team members that are from engineering, PM, design, docs, and they're all actually watching the participant on the other side interact with the product. So
this is real. Like, these are real people. They're from. We flew them in, or where'd they come from?
Yeah. So these are real people. So in Redmond, we run studies every day in our lab.
Every day.
Yeah. So we have over 10,000 customer connections a year.
Wow.
And what you see right here is just one of many studies that we run. So the entire product team joins us because basically what they're doing is understanding how the customer is using our product, but they can see everything about the customer, right? So they can see their facial expressions, they can see if they lean back in the chair, cross their arms, if they're smiling in delight. This actually fosters empathy with our product team and inspires them to take action to change the product if it doesn't fit our customers' needs.
Wow, actually I recognize this guy. I'm going to see if I can grab. Hey, Jeffrey. Do you got a second?
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
how are you?
Haven't seen you in a
Haven't
long
seen you in a
time.
while. So, what are you guys testing here?
So we're trying out some new designs for our Azure Storage SDK, client libraries, and we have a couple of different designs. We bring the people into the usability study and we give them tasks to perform to try to download a blob. And they try it with version 1, they try it with version 2. A couple minutes ago, you just missed it, but they high-fived each other because they were really successful in a short amount of time.
Excellent.
And that's very reassuring for our team.
That's great. And this is the whole team is watching this and they're getting to see kind of in real time, did we get it right or not?
Yes, exactly. And what we can do better and so on, yes.
That's fantastic. It's good to see you. Thanks for your patience. All right, so we've got SDK, we've got Python, SCVS for Mac, we've got the Azure Developer Platform. Can we peek in one of these?
Yeah, let's go ahead and take a look in Lab 1. So this is the Visual Studio Code Python study. And what you're seeing here is people with, or developers that have experience in Python but are using Visual Studio Code for the first time with our Python extension.
Can I open the door?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to like anger the beast. Can they see us?
So what you're seeing here is that on the other side, our participants, they can't see us. It's a one-way mirror, so think Law and Order. So they can't see anyone on the product team, but the product team can see exactly what they're doing on the other side. And the beauty of these type of studies is that we can not only see every mouse click that they have on this screen, but we can see their body language.
So you're doing this every single day?
Yes, we have over 10,000 customer engagements every single year. Many of them come in the form of surveys, one-on-one interviews, or focus groups or site visits. So this is our culture room. Let me grab Travis. He'll walk us through. Travis.
Hey, so we're showing the culture room. So the culture room is a room that we walk teams through to help them understand about what we're trying to achieve in really becoming a customer-obsessed org. You know, we know that Satya is walking us through every day trying to transform this company into being, creating zero distance between us and the customer. So we spend a lot of time in this room thinking about how we can change our culture to better connect with our customers and really bring zero distance between us and engaging with our customers. So we talk a lot about hacking our culture. And we're spending a lot of time with our customers. It's so important that our developer community gives us feedback every single day in terms of where we're headed with the product and what we're trying to do.
It's so inspirational that there's so much more data-driven, there's so much more customer-obsessed. It's being baked in at every level. I was surprised that you were saying you're doing these UX labs every single day.
Right.
I hope people that are watching this are learning that this is happening and these things are being thought about.
Well, and the important thing to remember too is that to engage with us, you don't have to be in the UX lab. So we have developer community and there's so many ways to be in contact with us, to give us feedback about the product, even within Visual Studio, for instance.
Fantastic.
So we need customers to understand that we're here, we're listening, and we're engaging, we're trying to make the product better based on what they're giving us.
That's great. I'm going to go find some more PMs that are working on the product. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much, Travis.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great.
Dr. Rich,
Nice to meet
you so much.
Thank you.
All right, let's go find some more PMs.
Oh, sweet.
I think I saw
Hey, friends.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Hey.
I have just come from the UX lab. It's amazing. You got to go check it out. But I hear that you have some fun demos for me.
Yeah.
All right, let's see them. You know, I was talking with Julia and Amanda about some of the things in Visual Studio 2019 that kind of like delight people. Just little features that just make you happy when you're debugging. And you work on some of those things, Leslie.
Yeah, one of the cool things that we added for Visual Studio 2019 are data breakpoints, which if you're a C++ developer, then chances are you already know about this feature. But now C# and .NET Core users can rejoice because yeah, it is now in our managed code lives. And so basically this is a feature that allows you to break when an object's value changes. So if you want to hone in on a specific value of an object and not just the whole scope of an object, this is the way to go.
Cool, so you say, I want to know when that thing changes no matter where it changes and the breakpoint gets hit.
Right.
That's awesome.
It's super cool.
So like sometimes when you have like a really big application, you might have a big stateful object that's really, really deep, like a big dependency. Maybe if you're doing like a big game or something like that, and then you could use managed data breakpoints.
Yeah, absolutely. Except the problem is if you have a large application like a game, sometimes it can be near impossible to even debug it if you're using a previous iteration of Visual Studio. So teams across Microsoft, for instance, such as the Office team and the Edge team and Xbox, a couple of those teams, they've approached us like, hey, can you please let us actually debug our really, really big apps that are usually written in C++, because right now we're just getting constant out of memory errors. So now for 2019, we've made symbols out of proc for C++ applications, so you're now able to debug those applications without constantly experiencing those memory errors.
I think I recognize this game. Is this what I think it is?
Yes, this is Gears of War. So that's obviously a really big game, and as you can see, it's being debugged in Visual Studio 2019. We've also, just to compare it, we've tried to debug it in 2017. If you look in the task manager at the memory consumption being used, the amount of memory being consumed in 2019 is significantly lower than what it is in 2017 So no sweat there. You should be able to debug.
And also they gave you the source code to Gears of War, which
yeah,
is so awesome.
They're so nice.
So if I've got an application that works great locally, but maybe it's got a cloud service and I put that up in the cloud, what if it doesn't work well in production? How do I debug that?
Yeah, so normally in the past what you'd have to do is, either make a repro locally, which can be really tricky, or you'd have to try to garner what the issue is from a bunch of logs, and you may not even get all the relevant information that you need. So Visual Studio 2017 introduced snapshot debugging, which allows you to take a snapshot of your application and debug it while the code is still running in production without any impact on the end user's experience. So what we've added for 2019 on top of that is time travel debugging, which basically allows you to step through your code as you're using the snapshot debugger.
Seriously, literally time travel debugging. I'm moving forward and backward in time.
Exactly. Yep, so you can move forward, backward, frontwards.
And you get all the context about everything that's happening in your application.
Yes, so yeah, you still get the full functionality of the VS debugger, so call stacks, watch window, locals window.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I've got my application into production, but if it's got a bug and I need to debug, I probably didn't pass my unit test. What happened, Kendra?
Well, live unit testing can actually help you make sure that everything you push into the cloud has actually had a test run. So live unit testing can automatically rerun tests every time you make a code change.
Seriously, like every time you save it?
Yeah, so here I can make a quick code change, and you can see the test is rerunning in the background as I'm typing.
As you're typing?
Yeah, and I can get feedback on the test result right in the editor.
Okay, wow. So that was my bad to push the bug into production. Next time.
Yeah, it's on you, for sure.
Next time I will use live unit testing. So what app are you working on, Kendra?
So this is actually a little Twitter sentiment analysis app that we cooked up. So it gets all of the recent tweets on Visual Studio and runs them through Azure Cognitive Services to gauge sentiment. So here I have a little emoji, searching for emoji test, because emojis are super important.
Well, I gotta ask.
Yeah.
How did you get the emojis to display like that in the editor?
Because Visual Studio is awesome and recognizes Unicode characters. I didn't do anything. Yeah, so the refactoring that I just triggered is all of our code fixes and refactorings you can access through Control Dot, and that was one of the new refactorings, one of many that we added in Visual Studio 2019, wrapping parameters. So if you have super long parameters and it's difficult to see, some people prefer the code style of wrapping every new parameter on a new line.
One of the things that they were mentioning was that in the old days, I used to have to remember all of these different hotkeys, but now they're like Control T, Control Dot, Control Q. What's like is there like a ultimate refactoring?
Yeah, so Control Dot, when you're in the editor, will open all of the refactorings available where your cursor is. So it's very contextually clever, I guess. Control T is our main navigation shortcut for anything inside your code, and Control Q is anything within your menus and Visual Studio and tools options, that kind of thing.
So I just have to remember those three hotkeys, and I have the power of Visual Studio.
And we have little icons that you can open too. So a little screwdriver will appear, or a light bulb if you got a suggestion.
Very cool. And I'm now going to put emojis in all of my code.
Excellent. One of the first things you'll notice as soon as you open Visual Studio 2019 is the new colorization. So methods, local parameters, all of your user members have new Roslyn syntax classifications, so they get new colors. So you can see for each is purple here, parameters are this dark blue. We tried to mimic the Visual Studio Code colors as much as possible, because those had already been super successful in the community, and we got a lot of feedback that people loved them.
That's cool. So you gave Visual Studio a little pop. So it'll be the colors that I'm used to with just more context.
Yeah. A refactoring we added to Visual Studio 2019 is for each to link. It is the latest one to join the for loop refactoring family. So we have link to for each, we have for loop to for each, and converting back. Many of them, they're super fun to try out.
It makes me feel smart because I maybe can't write the link from scratch, but I can
Yeah.
totally write the triply nested for loop and then go whoosh, and it turns into link.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I'm like, yeah, I wrote that myself.
Everyone's, Scott, you can use link?
Yeah,
wow.
I can.
Secret.
So smart.
What if I'm getting started with a code base that's maybe a little crusty and I'd like to just kind of get a jump start? I don't want to refactor like step by step.
Yeah, a great way to apply all of the refactorings you want to is code cleanup. So you've probably configured all of the rules and tools options, what levels of refactorings, suggestions, warning, or errors you want this to be triggered on. You can export those to an editor config file that lives with your repository. All of your team members can have the same editor config file, and code cleanup will run the refactorings that you set in that.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, it's a great way to clean up your code.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, what do you have for me?
Oh my gosh, I have so much to show you today. I'm really excited. So Kendra was talking about those code fixes and refactorings that we have on Visual Studio 2019 for Windows now. We've actually brought the C# code editor from Windows over to Mac. So Visual Studio 2019 for Mac has the same IntelliSense, code refactoring, syntax highlighting that you get on Windows now.
So you're literally sharing code between the two?
We are, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So here we are in a Xamarin Forms project. So Scott, as you know, Xamarin is our .NET framework to run C# code on iOS and Android and watches and TVs, all that great stuff. And this project is Xamarin Forms, so 100% of the front end is in XAML, and it runs on both iOS and Android.
So you're sharing the UI across all of this?
Yep, we are, and it's great. And this is Tailwind Trader, so it's an app we demoed at Connect in the fall. And it's 100% Xamarin Forms, and it's using a new feature we have called Shell that does all your navigation for you.
Seriously?
Yeah. So coloring and changing the flyouts and the tabs is super easy, very easy to customize. That was Visual Studio 2019 for Mac. So let me flip over to Windows here. I have some more great stuff to show you for Xamarin. First off, we have IntelliCode support for Xamarin Forms XAML right out of the box.
Nice.
So you can go ahead and type out your controls and your attributes, and it just pops up with suggestions. It's really smart. We also have a property panel, so you can go in and change the colors of your controls, the layout, where they're positioned, the text, all that great stuff without actually having to write any XAML, which is very helpful.
Nice. One of the things that kept me from using Xamarin before was I thought it was really had a large install size, but that's way smaller in 2019.
Right, we dropped the install size from 23 gigs to 7 gigs, which is fantastic. It makes it way quicker to get started. We also did a lot of work on Android build and deploy performance. So it was previously really slow, and it took a long time to spin up the emulator, and then you had to build your project, deploy your project, and that inner dev loop, we call it, was taking people a really long time.
Yeah, I hear that the Android build times are way faster, and it's just a lot more fun.
Yeah, the build times are faster, the deploy times are faster. The emulator for Android now supports Hyper-V. We worked closely with the Hyper-V team on that.
That's great. That means I can have Android on an emulator on Hyper-V with Docker, and I can have my microservice talking to my Xamarin app.
Oh yeah, you can have it all working, and it's so much faster and so much smoother and cleaner now, so it's a lot of fun.
That's great. You've got a phone right here running Tailwind Traders?
I do. I also have this pair of pliers. And using 100% Xamarin Forms and Xamarin, we can actually take a photo of this pair of pliers right here.
Okay.
And it will recommend to us what we can buy that looks like this using computer vision. So
Wow,
it's
so
hooked
it
up
identified
to Azure.
it, and it's already talked to the back end.
It already has,
That
and
was
it
fast.
says, get this red multi-tool plier right here.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it's great.
So that is using a back end that's written in Azure.
Yeah, it's all in Azure.
Yeah, and we have some great tools in Visual Studio to enable you to get started developing for Azure.
So I can go and write a backend really quickly, starting with Visual Studio 2019.
That is correct. So one of the easiest ways we have to get started is we have a lot of project templates built into Visual Studio for dedicated Azure types like Azure Functions. We also have ASP.NET Core, which is just a great general purpose backend that can be hosted in lots of places running in Azure. Then when you're developing as a user, we have all sorts of emulators to run things locally, so you don't even necessarily need a cloud connection when you're developing on a day-to-day basis.
All right, well, I've landed the plane, and I'm ready to go from offline to online. I'm going to put this up into Azure.
Yeah, we've worked really hard to make that easy from Visual Studio. All you have to do is right-click the project, choose Publish, and you'll see a list of Azure targets available to run it. If you don't have an opinion yet, we recommend starting with Azure App Service, as we think you'll find that the easiest place to get started. And after you've published your application, the core part of your code that's going to run, we make it really easy to create other dependencies that the application may need to function correctly, including SQL Server and Azure Storage directly from Visual Studio. And actually, once you've published it, even if you don't need it initially, one of the new things we've added in 2019 is we've made it easy to come back and add those at any point in the application's development lifecycle.
So you're making that publish dialog kind of re-entrant. I can go back in and say I want a little SQL and I want a little storage and add that to my existing publish?
Absolutely, yeah. So if you decide that you need storage 3 months into development, you just add that to the app service environment directly from Visual Studio without the need to go to the portal or some other tool.
That's cool. I love everything that you just showed me, except my boss won't give me access to create anything new in Azure.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. So one of the other things we offer in Visual Studio is the ability to choose existing resources. So as long as you have permissions to publish to the resource, you can, through Visual Studio, select an already created resource in Azure, and that same Publish Summary tab will get populated just like you created everything yourself. In fact, we even are able to show you the SQL and storage dependencies.
Fantastic. You've solved all my problems. This has been great.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I'm going to take off to my next thing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys.
All right, bye-bye, everybody. That was so much fun for me. I hope you enjoyed getting to know some of the people who work on Visual Studio 2019 and taking a peek behind the scenes. As I mentioned at the start, there's a ton more content coming today with 11 live stream sessions starting right now at launch.visualstudio.com. Be sure to ask questions and let us know what you think, either on Twitter at #VS2019 or join us for live conversations on Twitch at twitch.tv/Visual Studio. Whew, that was a lot.
Good job, Scott. You added some value.
Well, I hope we fix that in post. Cool, that's very cool. So who do you think I should go and see? See, it's fake, isn't it?
It sounds so weird.
It does sound weird because we don't know what you just said, but
no,
whatever it
I'm
was,
gonna get straight
I was
face
super
this time, I
excited.
promise.
I can actually do my continuous integration right there.
That was so good.
Yeah, I have it right here, and it's hooked up to the interwebs and running the back end.
High five on that.
High five. We can do high five. LiveShare high five. Try it again, is that okay?
Hey, Kendra. Come out this way.
Yeah, Kendra.
Stop ruining the illusion that you're standing next to Scott.
So I was able to sign in directly to GitHub from the start window.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, right. That's exactly right. And then I'm going to say something that I'm going to say something.
Beth, yeah, I'm over here in Studio C getting ready for all kinds of interaction with our community throughout the day today.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about what you're going to do, and then we'll go over some of the stuff that we have for today.
So there's a bunch of live watch parties going on right now, and I know you're watching us out there in places like Helsinki and Ireland and Arizona, and even there's a group of folks in Mumbai that are watching us right now. We're going to reach out and we're going to talk to some of those folks throughout the day today. And then a little bit later on, we've got a couple MVPs joining us back here in Studio C. We're going to wrap things up with a post-event party live with a bunch of great guests right here.
My understanding is that there might be prizes, or did I get that wrong?
Oh, there might be. There might be a lot of prizes. Awesome. We've actually got 21 prizes that folks can win.
21? I mean, are you trying to go for like a super round number, 21? How did you come up with that?
We did have a round number, but somebody else said, hey, here's a cool prize to give away also, so we made it 21.
Awesome. All right, so let me go through some of the scheduling. We'll leave Jeff there so we can both like What happened to your beard, man?
I don't know. I've been told this is my color. What do you think? Is that good? Does that look good? Visual Studio purple?
I'm going to read the schedule now. All right, so you just saw an awesome keynote. I love that keynote because you get to see a little bit of the personality of the people that work here. We are people after all, and we are obsessed with doing the right thing by you. And so if you ever have feedback for us, we want that. Hopefully you saw some of that in the keynote. We are super passionate about making sure that developers are productive and that they use the latest and greatest tools. I've been using them for almost 20 years. Man. All right, so what we've got coming up next is we have Amanda Silver and Joseph Hill. They are only going to be taking your questions. I'm going to be getting them on this board, so use the hashtag VS2019 and we'll get it on here and we'll ask questions. I have tons of questions for them, but I'm really all about the questions that you have, so make sure we get those in. We also have coming up Write Beautiful Code Faster with the amazing Kendra Haven, so you're not going to want to miss that. And in the middle of these things, as Jeff was telling you, we're going to try to get some people, because there are over 70 live viewing parties across the world, 160 that are be going through May, and so there's a lot of people that are going to be enjoying this, I hope. Next we have a Streamline Your Dream Dev Team with Allison and John, so you're going to want to make sure you stay with that. We're going to look at squashing bugs and improving code quality with Leslie Richardson. I'm pretty excited about that. And then we have DevOps. Now DevOps is something that I've started to get into. I wish I would have done that during these days, if you know what I mean. Jeff, how long have you been coding, bud?
Oh gosh, Seth. I've been coding for 20, 25 years also, you know. I started in VB6, right? That was a thing.
He's older than me.
Now, hey, you can't tell.
Well, it's the beard. It gives it away, man. When you start coloring your beard, everyone knows. Like, you're trying to hide the gray.
I'm trying to hide the Fortran 77 remnants that are hanging around.
Nice. So what is the most favorite thing, reminiscence you have about Visual Studio? Because I know you've been in Visual Studio almost your whole career, too.
Oh, my gosh. You know, when I look at the stuff that's come out with Visual Studio 2019, I'm a huge fan of not just LiveShare, but IntelliCode. The new IntelliCode features where it gives me a little star next to those features, those things that I might want to use in my code, properties, methods, events that are most common, are a great way for me to learn an API that I might not be familiar with. I had somebody that I was working with over Visual Studio LiveShare last week. They weren't familiar with some of the libraries we were working with, and because they saw those IntelliCode charms popping up, the star to hint at different features, they immediately knew how to make the most of the API we were using. Really, really great help for those folks.
And that's really cool because I thought I saw someone on Twitch. Yes, we're watching as you talk. I saw someone like, we need to do the thing where we hook up someone's head and we just write the code that they think. I think that's, I want to work on that.
That's IntelliCode and machine learning.
We'll call it IntelliBrain.
IntelliBrain.
Should we get that trademark, people? We should
Somebody get me that domain
Someone
name.
gave me a side eye. All right, so next, after talking DevOps, we're going to have an AI-infused break with me. I'm going to do a half hour of AI. It's going to be legit fantastic because I just actually learned a lot of stuff about Visual Studio and Python. So we're going to be doing a little bit of that.
Python's amazing.
I know. I'm such a fan. Like I said, I did Visual Studio for many years, and then I went back to school because I had to get an education, and then I used Python there. Next, we're going to do accelerate your C++ development, which is pretty powerful. I love C++. I just don't like cleaning up after myself. That's a programmer joke, Jeff.
That is. We like our GC processes here in .NET.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
After that, we have cross-platform mobile apps made easy using Xamarin, and then to the cloud with Visual Studio and Azure. Now, here's the thing. We're going to try to get these up as soon as possible. And so if you're going to be asking us when they're going up, we're going, like the gerbils are working as fast as they can in the back. We have put an extra large wheel and they're running as we speak.
But of course, Seth,
Yes,
folks
sir.
that are watching here on Twitch or if they're over on Mixer, you can hit that video on demand button up top and rewind to earlier in the day if you want to go check something out that already happened.
That way. He knows his stuff. I had to look at the monitor because it's like he's over in this area. not in this area.
Yeah,
okay?
physically I'm on that side.
All right. Dan Roth is going to come and talk about building amazing web apps with .NET Core. And then finally, 2 more sessions, a tour of Visual Studio for Mac with Michaela Hutchinson. I hear there's a lot of cool stuff, and we have Joseph here. If you want to ask him like hard questions, you can. And then Amazing Devs doing amazing things. That's with you, Jeff, right?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of MVPs, a couple of Microsoft MVPs that'll be joining us, Ginny Coy and Oren Novotny, and we're going to talk about some of the things that have been happening in the preview channel for Visual Studio 2019 that they've been watching, and what's coming up, some of the things they're seeing coming in the next preview channel for Visual Studio.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've blathered enough. Let's go and give some time to some amazing people. We got about 60 seconds before we go to them, but what we want to do is please make sure to stay tuned for all of the cool stuff. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to learn. There's a lot of fun stuff that we're going to do after, and we want your comments. Above all, we want your questions. We will get them up here on the tag board. There's 24 already. I'll push this button and then we'll start to ask them. I'm going to be the Vanna White today of Visual Studio 2019. I'm very excited about that. And so without further ado, let me introduce 2 people. Well, let's have you introduce yourselves. We have Joseph and Amanda. Tell us who you are and what you do. We'll start with you, Amanda.
Sure. I'm Amanda Silver. I'm the Director of Program Management for Visual Studio and VS Code.
Fantastic.
And I'm Joseph Hill. I'm Director of Program Management for Visual Studio for Mac and Xamarin.
VIPs, as we like to call you too. So why don't you give us like a small recap of the stuff that we talked about. Just a tiny one so that we can get the pump prime for people to ask questions. We'll start with you, Joseph.
Well, yeah, so as I said, Visual Studio for Mac, Xamarin. Pretty excited. I think Visual Studio 2019 developers will be super excited about the improvements we've made to performance and stability for both Xamarin and Visual Studio for Mac. In Visual Studio, we've reduced the download size a lot. So as you're going through installing Visual Studio 2019 today and you're thinking, oh, can I put 25 gigs of mobile development tools on my desktop? It's like 1/3 that size now, so you should definitely opt into that.
Fantastic. So did you just zip stuff up, or what is it? Was there some?
Yeah, that's right. Somebody introduced us to this this archiving tool, and we're like, wow, this is great. Why aren't we using this?
Tarted DGZ it all up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Amanda, what about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think today is the big news of Visual Studio 2019 being ready for everybody to take on. So, there's a kind of get first start experience so that you can really get into the flow with your code that your other teammates are working on. There's Visual Studio LiveShare kind of in the Visual Studio 2019 box out the gate. So basically we have both collaboration at the check-in time so that you can actually go and review pull requests and things like that inside of Visual Studio, but also pre-check-in. So you can actually have a real-time collaboration session with somebody else that you're working with. The other things that are super exciting are, Visual Studio IntelliCode we talked about, which basically is kind of the first steps towards allowing AI and machine learning to basically enhance your productivity as a developer. But there's so many things that I can't even name all of them, right? We've improved the UI a little bit so that it just feels a lot cleaner, so you have headspace to kind of focus on the code that you're writing. We've improved the search capability in Visual Studio 2019 so you can actually discover new features that you might not have been familiar with previously. One of my favorite features is actually that we've moved the C++ debugging out of process. And so that has been absolutely huge for people who are working on very large-scale C++ applications, especially folks like those that are working on AAA games, because they used to have a situation where they would basically run into out-of-memory exceptions in the debugger after about 5-10 minutes of coding, and then all of a sudden now they really don't run into those things anymore. They can have, half-hour, couple hour long debugging sessions.
And that's pretty amazing because I saw there was actually debugging like a huge game, and just like a game by itself is pretty big, and now when you have all the debug symbols and you have to keep track of all, I mean, it's pretty amazing what you're able to do with that.
Yeah, we have a lot of testimonials from folks who are building large-scale C++ applications that it really is a game changer for them.
Awesome. So let's get to the questions, and then I'll intersperse with some of mine. We have here my friend Toby Loba. What features do the Community Edition ship with?
So actually our community edition is actually exactly the same as our professional edition. It just has different licensing restrictions on it. So any of the features that are in our professional edition are also available in the community edition. And obviously that's thousands and thousands and thousands of features. I can't name all of them.
That's cool. So let's start a little bit with some of the streamlining that happened. You both mentioned there was some streamlining that happened with Visual Studio. Can you talk a little bit more in depth about that? I did notice myself, because I installed the RC last week, there was some snappiness to it. How did we make it a little bit faster? I know this happened in Visual Studio for Mac as well as Visual Studio for Windows, yes.
Yeah, so just to start with Visual Studio for Mac, we've started to take code from Visual Studio over to Visual Studio for Mac. And luckily, like our editor is where we've been putting a lot of the work. It's written in C#. Microsoft's already had an editor written in C#, so being able to bring it over to the Mac resulted in we have 95% of the code for our new editor coming from the Windows implementation. But it's also snappy because we were able to move to a native Cocoa front end, and so we get native scrolling and better support for right to left rendering, word wrap. A lot of features we couldn't do in our previous editor we're able to do through building on a native rendering base with like you said, streamlining's where it's at. Bringing over Visual Studio Code, and we're eyeing the future, the roadmap, more features that we can bring over from Visual Studio and develop features in conjunction with Visual Studio. Amanda mentioned earlier Get to Code. That's we're super excited about that because that's a feature we were able to bring to both IDEs at the same time with launch today.
What does Get to Code mean?
So Get to Code is basically the idea that we want you to get into your coding environment and become productive in the zone while you're programming as quickly as possible. Right. And so, Visual Studio originally was designed in an era when everything was installed on a bunch of disks that you would buy off of a shelf at some large, big box, digital store, and then you'd install all of it, including help and all of the templates and all of that kind of stuff. Nowadays, a lot of developers really start with either hosted repositories that are hosted in a private server or hosted in a public repository. And so if that's really where people are starting, we wanted to make sure that that is a really super productive experience inside of Visual Studio 2019. So if you open up Visual Studio 2019, you're going to see kind of a streamlined start experience where the options are start from an online repo, start from a template, create new project, start from an open project or anything that you've opened recently, and so on. And so you can really get into the zone of coding as quickly as possible.
Honestly, that's probably one of my favorite features where I start it up and it actually starts up. Now, you were going to talk, no, because usually it took a long time. Look, I'm being honest here. We're all friends here. But now it's really snappy. I get to, what do you want to work on?
Yep. I think that's really the goal, is we wanted to make sure that everybody who's new to the product, but also those who have been using the product for years and years and years, can basically get into the zone coding as quickly as possible.
Now, Joseph mentioned a little bit about some of the streamlining that happened in Visual Studio for Mac. Can you describe a little bit some of the streamlining that went on in Visual Studio for Windows?
Well, I mean, in some ways, so Joseph was talking a lot about kind of the installer and things like that, and we have definitely improved the install experience, the update experience, and things like that in Visual Studio 2019 a lot. But some of the ways that it's been streamlined are actually kind of UI changes. So if you start up Visual Studio 2019, you might notice that there's a slight color theme change from Visual Studio 2017. And if you put them side by side, you'll actually, I find that Visual Studio 2019 feels just cleaner, and you're not really quite sure why. But we've done a lot of work to actually make sure that we've cut bezels and we've cut repetitive text and stuff like that, so that you can really be focused on your code. We've also kind of streamlined the menuing system so that it actually occupies one less row, so that you have one more row of code that you can focus on. And then I think the other thing is, with the enhanced kind of search experience, you now don't need to as often hunt and peck through the menuing system to find the thing that you need. What I find using Visual Studio 2019 is if I want to use a certain feature or install a component that I hadn't installed previously, that I can actually just go to the search menu, type whatever I'm looking for, and it'll come up there, and it'll then kind of streamline my experience exactly to the menu that I need.
Awesome. Joseph, do you have something?
I was just going to add to that, yeah, because on Xamarin, especially impactful is we've really improved the solution load time and solution creation time. So, that's a snappier fill too when you're able to.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even touch on that, but performance is absolutely huge. I mean, I talked about the C++ debugger being out of proc and the impact that has, but we've also done some pretty amazing things in terms of solution load time, project load time, as well as unit test discovery, so that it's now getting started in any typical project is tens of percentage points better.
That's awesome. I mean, I personally noticed it. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of work in Visual Studio Code with Python, and they said, they were like, hey, you got to do this AI thing. I'm like, and they said, hey, you can do Python in Visual Studio. I'm like, oh, can you? And I went in there, and it's a surprising, like it felt like I was back in my C# days, but it was Python, which was really cool. All right, from Frank Ofoedu, all the way from Nigeria, will there be an offline ISO installer for the community version? This will help developers here who don't have stable internet connection there.
Yeah, so we actually haven't been doing an ISO installer with 2017 or 2019. What we have is a layout option so that you can actually create your own offline installer and then access it that way. So you could certainly use Azure or something like that to create that layout and then install it from there.
Cool. All right, so from Ken, we have, can a single developer release a commercial app on Community Edition if there are restrictions? Can you please elaborate?
Yeah, so the Community Edition is basically for teams that are smaller than 5. So that is definitely something that's supported with Community.
Awesome. Here's another one from Shannon. Will there be an issue if my team uses VS 2017 and check-in code into Git while using 2019? Will we be constantly batting for updates of the solution project files? Meaning, is the solution different?
So the solution generally should not be different. You should be able to actually collaborate on them. But for the most part, what we suggest is that you have basically a team that's kind of looking at migrating your solution to 2019. You can do this on the same box. So I think the important thing is that an individual developer can kind of go and survey the new release, and they can do it side by side on the same box without actually impacting the rest of their source code or the stability of their 2017 install, and evaluate it, and then kind of migrate the team over to the 2019 version.
I see, and this goes to a little bit of what Samuel is asking here. Can you upgrade from VS 2017 to 2019? You can actually have them both at the same time and not even interfering with each other. Is that right?
That's right. So you can install 2017 right next to 2019, and actually, in fact, I do use sometimes and when the other times. One of the things that we've really worked on in the last version is streamlining the upgrade experience from 2017 to 2019. So where in 2017 you would have to kind of pick the workloads, basically pick which SDKs, what project types you wanted to work on. If you've already done that in 2017, then your update experience to 2019 should be super, super easy because we've basically migrated all of your settings, all of your workloads to the 2019 installer.
Now here's a fun question. Was there any really big features that you wanted to include but didn't make the cut? Now, it feels like recently Visual Studio, we've been putting out stuff super early. It's not like it used to be like, we'd wait 2 years and then it would come in this huge box. Tell us a little bit about how you plan and what goes into releases.
Both. You want to take that one, Joseph?
Well, sure. Yeah, I mean, it speaks right to the heart of the VS for Mac release. We listen to feedback from users, and we test features as we're going. And the really big push that we have for VS for Mac 2019 is to switch the editor over to that editor I was describing earlier. That's a preview today in VS for Mac 2019. You can go into your preferences and select the new editor. It's a great experience, and I recommend you do it. Right now, it's in C#, but we held it back from turning it on by default because it just wasn't the right call, it wasn't the best thing for users. But as that comes online, like in updates to 2019, we'll have it on by default very soon, followed by additional languages, XAML, JavaScript, Razor, Blazor, etc.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, so especially with our update cadence, where we now have preview releases coming out super regularly, and we have updates coming out every few weeks or so. I never feel terrible about actually not getting a particular feature into Visual Studio because I know that it's coming down the road super quickly. There are a couple that are in basically like preview at this point that will make it into an update shortly. One that comes to mind is time travel debugging. Another one is the IntelliCode kind of being in the box. Another one is the PR experience. All of those things will be coming up in future updates. And I think one of the things that's really changed over the last couple of years in terms of how we manage Visual Studio and kind of talk about it with the community is we're actually pretty transparent about what our roadmap looks like. And so you can actually look for a Visual Studio roadmap, and you can see all of these features that are coming down the pike.
Yeah, and this is very different than what it used to be, because I remember we would just be like, oh, wow, it's out. But I have talked to, for example, just with languages, with Mads Torgersen, I have talked to him years in advance before some, like C#8's coming out, and I talked to him like a year and a half ago about the features that they were just thinking about, which is pretty cool. Now I'd like to move on to IntelliCode, because I'm a machine learning person, and this is an interesting question that we're going to table just for a second while you talk about IntelliCode. What is it? And maybe there's some concerns that people have. How do you address them? Oh, for example, he's worried if IntelliCode suggests code according to what most people use, couldn't that cause bad practices around the world as a result of most people using old inefficient practices?
Yeah, so I mean, IntelliCode is the first steps in a long road towards allowing machine learning to enhance your developer experience. And so, so the first thing that we did is we actually trained it on public repos that were highly rated. And so we assumed that if they were highly rated, that probably meant that they were decent code. What we've now added is the ability to train your IntelliCode machine learning models on your own custom code, even private code that's unique to your team. And so you actually can select kind of which repos you use to train those models.
Yeah, so it's basically you get to choose what models you do.
Yeah, that's right. And not only that, once you do that, once you choose to train on a model, which might take a couple of minutes to kind of get the model back, because it actually has to go and kind of calculate it in the cloud, create the machine learning models, you can actually share that model with your other teammates. So let's say you're a developer that's inside of a large enterprise with lots of developers on it, and you build a common framework for your team. You could actually train the IntelliCode model on that common framework, and then share that model just like you would share any kind of library or a source repo with the other developers on your team. So they don't even need to go through the process of training it on that custom library. You've done that, you've curated that, and then you can make sure that they have the most productive experience on that library.
And I think that's an important distinction, right? Because like he brings up a good point. What if it's not according to the way we want to do it? That's the way I read it. You can actually use your own code and train it on that and have your own style as a company in the model. Okay, right. A couple more questions. There's one new coming in here. This one's a funny one. How fast can I install Visual Studio 2019?
So the absolute minimum installer for Visual Studio 2019 should take about 2.5 minutes. But of course, that comes with no workloads. So what you're going to get with that is basically like a lightweight editing experience with lightweight language services. So you might get some grammar and syntax. You might get some grammar and syntax checking, but not really kind of semantic analysis.
It's pretty fast. I mean, like I downloaded a couple of workloads, and it was like I always check all the things, which I probably shouldn't do. And that takes a little bit of time because you're downloading a lot of different workloads. But I feel that the greatest thing is you have choice in what it is that you put on.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we've definitely been working to try to make sure that our installers for various workloads are a lot more lightweight.
Yeah, that's why I smiled when I heard the question, because I was like, man, you know, depending on the configuration, like the install times have just dropped so significantly. Yeah. And yeah, minimal, 2 minutes, sure, but like for your workloads, you're going to be pleased. So
because we learned how to zip, of course.
That's right,
we
exactly.
We just figured out. Here's a really important question. Is the new Visual Studio 2019 editor ADA compliant?
Yeah, so we've definitely been working on improving the accessibility of Visual Studio 2019 for a couple of years. And actually 2017, I believe, was ADA compliant. But we continue to work on that and improve that.
Okay, awesome. So what other features did you really, because we talked about speed, we talked about IntelliCode a little bit. Is there another feature that you feel people should really look at in Visual Studio 2019 for both of you? Putting you on the spot here.
I sure leapt in to fill some audio space. I'm stalling for Amanda because I know she's going to have a great one.
No, I mean, I think some of the stuff that we've done, like for example, we've introduced debug search. So basically, if you're in the middle of a debugging session, you can actually go and search for different levels of all of the various variables that you might want to get values for. So you can basically kind of search on possible expressions that you might want to evaluate in the debug session. We have a lot of new like refactoring features. So one of the big capabilities that we've introduced is code cleanup. So you can actually kind of go and, you know, if you have style guidelines with an editor config, which actually can be inferred using IntelliCode, then you can actually go and just hit a hotkey, Control-K, Control-D for most people, and it'll clean up that entire file. So there are tons of goodies like that. But we also didn't even talk about kind of deploying to Azure, right? So, or to Docker or containers or Kubernetes. So a lot of kind of what we've also been working on is making it so that, you know, cloud native applications are super easy to author with Visual Studio 2019.
That's cool. Yeah, because I mean, we can write all the code we want, but if it falls in the forest and there's no one around, does it even make a sound? We got to put it in the cloud, right? A question for you: when will the Python tools in Windows version land in the Mac version?
No ETA yet. I think we're definitely listening to feedback there, interest. We have the ability to add new languages, and we're doing that all the time. But you know, Python's not on the immediate delivery. But hey, reach out to me, and I would love to hear how you want to use Python.
If enough people yell at Joseph,
it makes it happen.
I'm just saying. We had donuts here this morning because we all yelled at Joseph. All right, from Evan, how do I get the new colorization of the text in VS 2019 if the installer is automatically importing my 2017 color configuration?
So, this question is slightly ambiguous. I will answer it in two ways, kind of assuming that it's two different questions. So one is, I spoke a little bit earlier about the theming updates in Visual Studio 2019. So that, if you're using the default light theme, then that you'll just automatically get the default light theme. You can always go back and reset your settings for the theme and kind of set it to the default light theme, and then you'll get those new kind of color options. That doesn't necessarily impact your text editor options, because if you have your own custom settings for what you want your editor to look like, then that will override what our default theming does. And so for that, you'd have to go into Tools Options and basically reset. Yeah.
So we care more about what they set in there as opposed to what we want.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people who have very particular preferences. Or I saw somebody, I think this was an April Fool's joke, but I saw somebody yesterday who was talking about the hot dog theme that they'd like to set on their colleagues so that basically it's a red background with yellow text.
Oh.
So if somebody steps out without locking their machine, they do that.
That would be, I would spill my drink. There's shininess.
New is nice.
I love it. From Dimitri, any news about Visual Studio Extensibility in VS 2019?
So what we've really been working on with the ecosystem, or in the 2019 era, as we've been developing it, is basically getting more things out of process and asynchronous. And so that really is improving the reliability and the performance of the core Visual Studio product.
Awesome. So from Arwin, just to let you know, he installed the absolute minimum with no workloads. It's 2.5 minutes for him.
I think that's what I said.
Yeah, which is awesome. Like, we have community validation that this is actually the right thing. I just want to make sure that you knew that. Does VS 2019 have an ARM template validation and improved intelligence? Now, ARM template, I'm assuming they mean Azure Resource Management templates.
Yeah, so that's actually a highly requested feature that we're looking at for the next semester, basically.
Cool. Yeah. So here's a question about, because they're so excited. Actually, there is an answer to this question. Any idea about when will the IntelliCode be available for VS Code for C#?
So the IntelliCode itself is actually something that's available for Visual Studio Code, and it's actually the same extension for any programming language that you're programming in. So if you're doing Python or C# or TypeScript down the road, then it will just automatically pick up which programming language you're programming in, and then kind of the completion list will start to show up.
Cool, and it's so subtle that you may not even know that it's just look for the little star.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes I miss it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the one I want. Oh, good.
Yeah, that was a big debate. We were trying to decide if we should actually distinguish the IntelliCode recommendations or just change the reordering. And in the end, we decided to include the star just so that you know kind of what's coming from there, because otherwise I think you probably wouldn't notice.
Yeah.
And you'd just feel more productive, but you wouldn't really know why.
And not only that, but I feel like when it comes to AI things, we need to be pretty upfront that it's being generated by AI.
Yeah, I agree.
And a star is really good for that. Okay, so from M. Kenyon II, what changes have you made for deploying to Docker, VS 20? You mentioned something a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, so we've actually improved a lot of the ASP.NET kind of publish experience, so you can actually go and deploy directly to a Docker container. We've made it easier to kind of discover a Docker container that you might want to attach to, things like that.
That's awesome. So next question, is there an integrated console in VS 2019 like Code? Great feature in Code, we'd love to have it in VS.
I think what he means is an integrated terminal
yeah.
experience. So one of the things that actually this came from LiveShare, when we found that people were collaborating, a lot of times the issue of the bug repros on your machine, but it doesn't repro on my machine, are actually due to environment setup and configuration. And the only way to kind of go figure that out is to actually go and get terminal access to the other person's machine. And so via LiveShare, we increased the priority of introducing an integrated terminal in 2019 for the purposes of LiveShare. So now it is there.
Cool. So that was a good answer. Yeah, absolutely. From Ishan Bhutani, how has VS 2019 improved over VS 2017 in performance parameters for low configuration devices? And maybe they mean like not so powerful machines.
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't looked at that specific question, kind of those dimensions, super recently. So I don't know. I can't just cite that off the top of my head.
I couldn't speak specifics, but just to point out on the Mac, I run a 2013 MacBook because the keyboard works great.
Oh, snap.
And so, like, you know, at least on that side, I know that our improvements are working great on older hardware. Very visible. So
that's cool. Well, we have about 2 minutes left, and so if there's any other questions that come in, I'll make sure to grab them. But what's the takeaway for people? What do you want them to do? What do you want them to tell us if they're experiencing about their experience? Because, like, I'm a programmer. Usually, I've learned over the many years that if a customer says, "Yeah, but can it also?" it means that I did the right thing.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is go install Visual Studio 2019. It's safe to install on your machine right next to 2017. You can open up your projects and start working on them. And I think if you're encountering any kind of issues or have any kind of feedback, you can always go up into the right-hand corner with that little message box and basically send us a message of feedback to our dev community.
And we look at those. It's not like
we look at every single one.
Yeah. I mean, I know that because I work in the cloud advocacy group, one of our people put it in and they got like an email.
Yep.
Like every time I do stuff, you know, at Microsoft, I get an email from someone. They're like, "Hey, how was your experience?" They don't know who I am.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely use software to actually detect duplicates and things like that. And so if we find that it is a duplicate, then we might kind of resolve it and say, "Hey, this is a duplicate." But it's a suggestion, or if it's a feature request, or something like that, or an issue that you're encountering, then that will definitely be looked at by a person on our team.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It is time now for us to check in with Jeff. Jeff, are you there, buddy? Oh, we're not checking in with Jeff? Okay, that's okay. He's running. I saw him grab his hat and run over there. I think his beard turned white after that. Pretty excited about that. We have here to my left, Kendra Haven's going to be talking all about writing beautiful code faster. How are you, Kendra?
I'm doing good. How are you, Seth?
Fantastic. Now, for those that are watching, make sure you send in your questions because we'll have a little wrap at the end, okay?
Definitely.
All right, let's turn it over to you, my friend.
Okay, so
and then after duplicating my screen, where is that? Just a minute. Okay, we're finally here. After that LiveShare session, we'll give these caps and whatever these mystery boxes, I think it's a power bank or something, and 3 licenses from RevDebug. Just call me when you're ready. So I make the call. I think I have a camera here. Hey, can you hear us? No? We can't hear you. We can't hear you. And actually what we're going to do is test the LiveShare feature between a Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio 2019 that I have here. I still can't hear anything. I think it's me. So yeah. Now we can hear something. Maybe we can speak a little louder.
Yes, I will try.
No.
Taking up to a while now. Okay. Let's try again. I'll try to speak louder.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay.
So you already sent me a link, as I've seen, for LiveShare, but could you share your screen so we can see the process, at least from Visual Studio Code, exactly what it happens?
I'm sharing now. Tell me when you see.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, I'm running an application with building with .NET Core.
And you're using Visual Studio Code?
Yes. I can always send you an invitation from here because I have you on the contact list.
How did you add me there?
After the first time you connected,
Okay.
it appears as a recent contact.
Okay. As far as we found out, this is a Visual Studio Code feature because we couldn't find it in Visual Studio 2019.
Yeah, it's a part of the Visual Studio Code add-on.
Okay. So the invitation is already here. Is this the one that you sent it already?
Yes.
Okay.
I can always send in.
Yeah, but no. Everything is done. We are ready. I follow you right now, and we are ready to.
I will run the application.
Okay.
So I can show you. Supposedly, this application, this very simple application, has a bug.
Yeah, and you can see he's writing in his console, and we can see that here. And no matter the internet connection right now, it's.
I'm running the application, and you can see the local host from your machine.
I can check the servers right now. Probably I will have them here, and it's 5001.
Yeah.
Open in browser. No, it will. Probably it didn't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I didn't refresh. I just click on it to understand that something new came. And yeah, of course, we need to proceed.
So There's a problem here. The greeting is wrong. Can you see that?
Yeah, it says good morning instead of good afternoon.
So you have to debug it together.
Okay.
I will stop the server and I will close the debugging mode.
And actually I can follow you, I think, whatever you open up and show me where this error is. Right, so I click follow here and hopefully...
I'm opening the application and running as debug mode, and I'm going to go to the... Of course, we'll run again the application.
Yeah, now I'm following you and I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing in your screen.
I will add the breakpoint here and refresh the screen so we can see the breakpoint. Okay. And now you can step into it and see what is the problem.
I can...
Can you also see the values?
Yeah, I can also see the values here. That it's null, of course. And I also have intelligence. I can write. Sorry?
Yeah, so the problem is that the message is not correct for that case.
Yeah, of course. I can also write, and then you can see in the shared screen we are sharing everything. He sees what I'm seeing, and I can change the debug because I don't know. I want it here now to see if it will. Oh, where is it? Sorry.
Continue now.
Yeah. And now you can continue from what I wrote already.
Yeah. And if I run this one, we should get message.
Yep. If I refresh, we should see. Ah, yeah. I will hit the breakpoint now. But anyway. Yep. And if I refresh over here, then it hits your breakpoint again and mine. And if I continue from this one, yep. Another cool feature that Visual Studio Code has is chatting and sharing. I think it also has live voice or something, right?
Yeah, it's like this.
Yeah.
Can you show us what you see in your? You can switch the.
Yeah, we can switch the share screens so you can see the
screen.
scene.
You can start sharing.
Okay. And sharing is done from this one. Yeah, share screen. And I see you. And this is my window, and what else? My terminal window. So we can play around from there, and you can do whatever you want, and you can see that it will change here everything.
Yeah. Can you start sharing? See?
I didn't?
No.
Ah, sorry. Can you see now?
Yeah. Let me change it. I will go here.
You can also see where your cursor is and follow it around. Okay, yeah. Better.
This is very cool.
Sorry?
This is very cool.
Yeah.
You can share the code, the server, the
And actually,
also.
yeah, and actually, no matter the slow internet connection, some problems that we have here, this was pretty fast. I mean, we didn't have any problems.
Yes, it's instant.
Yeah, yeah.
And the debugging, the shared debugging, it's
That we can stir the step into thing.
yeah, and see the variables.
It's very nice. Now we have another surprise for you.
Oh.
I have some some swag here. Actually, I have 3 Rev Debug licenses that they are in my email with PDF, so I can send it to you. And I have here for the people here 3 cups and 3 power banks that they can have. But in order to have them, they have to ask some questions, which we will probably not be able to answer because we are not Visual Studio experts. But we will try, and you will win it anyway.
Okay.
Your people, yeah, sure. But your people will, if they have any questions, they can ask. They can win a Rev Debug license. I will send them all to you after this talk. So yeah, who has some question? Yeah.
Why do you still use the very old release candidate version and not the preview 4.4? Or even the new...
I was testing it last night and it's working, and I know Murphy's Law, so I said, okay, let's stick with that.
You don't dare to update now?
Yeah, I will after the meetup. You.
Let me show you the people here.
Sorry? Yeah. We can do that if you don't have any problems. I don't know. We have this GDPR thing, so it's pointing at me.
They have more people that they all run to their homes in order to install the new.
You know what? I didn't show you something. Since we're taking photos, I had to show you this. This is a legal thing. If you don't want your photo anywhere, then send your request to me, and I will gladly that blur around you, or don't even publish the photo. So yeah, I forgot about this. Thanks. Next question. Who had one? Yeah.
The only problem is that I'm not so
sorry, Kostas. Sorry, can you hear me? You are not what?
I'm very good looking.
You can see your face there. Yeah, I know. Okay, next question. Can you?
What about the new C# features, language features?
The new C# 8 features. Yes. Yeah, sure, but that is a different, I think, different topic. We will talk about that. Probably we have another meetup. I can tell you for now about it in Visual Studio. Okay. So yeah, I mean, sorry. The question, Kostas, was if C# 8 will be integrated in the new Visual Studio. And do you have any answers? I already.
It's a matter of framework, not of the studio.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. And you win the cup because we knew the answer.
Okay.
Next one?
The release is not
yeah.
announced yet. So not announced yet. How many participants does the shared debugging session support? So can it be a group 5, 3 people?
We tested with 3 and it's working perfect. Probably even more. But I think even now what was a little confusing, if you have the smallest lag, one is pressing F5, the other one is not pressing, and breakpoints and everything. I think with more than 3 people might be confusing, and actually it would be useful to just watch what is happening than to actually collaborate and change things. So yeah, another question that we knew, so another cup for you. And you also had some, sorry? Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I didn't. Yeah. Yeah. Here you are. I have a T-shirt for you. I promised you, and I have it in your size. I promised you since last summer. You know. Okay, but next it's you. Yeah.
Do you have any experience in live debugging desktop applications? So does it also work like someone starts a debugging session and the other one?
Actually, yeah. Actually, doesn't start the entire application. If you mean the Windows application.
Like the actual window, because
Yeah. You are downloading the code locally. When you are live sharing, actually you're downloading the code locally in a temp directory, and in Transform View, it doesn't exchange screens, you exchange, let's say, commands or something. So yeah, the first thing that we tested was with desktop app, and I think no, not this one. I think it was one from a previous meetup that we also had in Greek, and this was this one. Yep, we tested with this one and it was working perfect in both parties. So yeah, this mystery box for you, and you had a question, right?
Yeah, so I have a really old computer where I like to test stuff, so what are the minimum requirements for
Wait to give you the t-shirt. The minimum requirements?
Yeah.
I don't know. The minimum requirements to run Visual Studio, I guess. So
But this one looks,
there are no extra requirements.
This one looks way more lightweight than 2017. So
The minimum requirements of 2019 of Visual Studio. I have no idea.
8 GHz processor, 2 GB RAM.
Okay, I was about to do that, but.
It's recommended. 2.5 GB if you're running a virtual machine.
And last one. Yeah.
Did you test with LiveShare with large applications and how much code is downloaded if I have a bad internet connection, for example? If I have an application about 1 gigabyte, and how much of the code is downloaded?
1 gigabyte of code.
Binary.
Binaries.
Binaries. How much of the code is downloaded, and do you have any experience if this is proper for bad internet connection?
Yeah, actually for bad internet connection and not that sizes of blob files or whatever, we had some here, and for now you just need to refresh the window just by clicking and reminding that you need to connect and do some stuff. So it's working really great even with bad internet connections, because actually you're not exchanging print screens like the first team viewer that you were exchanging screens. You are exchanging commands. I don't know exactly, of course, how, but we didn't have any problems. Now for big files, I have no idea. Probably it will not work. Shouldn't that be in CDN or something, or an Azure storage or something shared anyway? I don't think you should have it on your machine and wait for the other party to download it. So yeah, probably we will have problems, but I think that is initially a bad design. You should have them somewhere else anyway.
John, I will greet you from Greece. Wish you nice.
I will send you the licenses, the 3 Rev Debug licenses, which was a sponsor also of this event.
Okay.
We'll email it to you, and you can give them to whoever you want there. Okay?
Yes, thank you. Nice night to all the guys here.
Good night.
Good night.
Καλό βράδυ.
Bye bye.
Καληνύχτα. Ciao. Yeah, so I think this is the end for today. If anyone wants some t-shirt, or some of them are really big, something for your table to eat on, you can have them. Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. That was the end.
Thanks.
See you in the next meetup if you are in the thing. Thanks.
Are they all XL?
Oop.
And it's like, you should totally look at this, because I feel like there's so many.
Hold on.
I still have a question.
I don't know why they are going off. Not touching anything.
You try to
That's mine, actually.
in between different operating systems like Linux and Windows or because they're different in files.
Windows and what?
And Linux or Mac OS.
With Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, but if it's possible to
If it runs with Visual Studio Code,
then it runs on Linux.
Yeah.
You have a different file system with stashes, and it would be interesting.
It's run. Actually, the initial thought was to do it like this, to have a presentation like this, but since we couldn't have both the screens, the plan was to have one screen here and one screen there. That would be cool. But since we couldn't find a way to do that locally. But yeah, sure, you can have that. You can do that.
Advertisements with
It's working really great. We already tested with some developers far away that we are actually working with, and the cool fact was that since they can't access our database because it's internal thing and it's private, they could debug the code with our data, but the data weren't there actually. So that was really cool. That was really nice.
Okay, thanks. Just thanks again for.
Did I give you? No.
Yeah, you gave me at least
Did I?
the MeetUp T-shirt. Yeah, you gave me T-shirt. Yeah, when you gave me the power bank.
Okay.
Okay. But thanks a lot for organizing those stuff. That's great.
Thank you for.